Well, welcome everyone to our Wildlife Economy debate series. My name is Sue Sneeman, and I'm the Director of Research at the School of Wildlife Conservation at the African Leadership University. The focus of today's debate discussion series is on the topic which, in terms of the wildlife economy, that we focus on wildlife ranching. And the purpose of the Wildlife Economy debate discussion series is really to engender objective discussion and debate around various wildlife economy topics so that we can provide different perspectives that will contribute to everyone's knowledge of the value of the wildlife economy in Africa. Just a couple of rules to get started. Please remain on mute throughout the debate. Any comments or questions in the chat, please, must be constructive and based on fact, not being emotive. Please use 3 question marks before a question to distinguish it from a comment, just so that we can make sure we capture and can ask the questions that you would like asked to our speakers. And anyone disrupting the debate or discussion in any way will be removed. And just a reminder again, I did say right at the beginning, please put your name and organization in the chat so that we can see, as well as our speakers can see, who they will be talking to. So this particular session is the second in a 2-part series that has been looking at mixed use systems, and Holly's going to provide you with more detail on that. I really also wanted to say a big thank you to Leanne Kant, one of our research assistants, who has been helping with all the logistics, planning and prep. And then thank you to our speakers who've also put in time to prepare for this. And then a very big thank you to Holly Dublin once again for being our moderator and for her time and energy that she's put into the prep and for this session. As you will see, there's a poll on the screen. Please do fill it out. As you know, if you've attended any of our debates before, we do a poll in the beginning and then a poll at the end, just to see if our discussion has changed any opinions or added any knowledge. And yeah, we like to just assess it through this poll. So we'll give you a few more seconds on the poll. And right now I'm going to quickly, the format is going to have this welcome and introduction, and then overview from the participants and context setting. Then we'll have a structured Q&A, which Holly will run with the participants, and then audience Q&A, and then the second poll. So please do, as part of that audience Q&A, as I mentioned, put questions in the chat with 3 question marks. But over to you, Holly.
Thanks very much, Sue, and welcome everyone. I see that the numbers are going up pretty rapidly, but people will catch up with us. Leanne, just signal me when you're going to be ending the poll. At the moment, we have a pretty good, really nicely optimistic audience, I must say. It's a good thing. A lot of times when I'm handling these things, we have a very pessimistic audience. So we're well over we're at now 70-some% that already feel pretty optimistic. That's a good feeling. So just as a slight introduction, I think most people on here and joining from wherever they are in the world know quite a bit about some of the topic that we're discussing. But for Africa, pastoral communities and wildlife have obviously existed for millennia within shared landscapes. And that has been a feature of many parts of the rangelands of Africa. But increasingly now we're seeing more and more challenges that are being faced, whether it's has to do with climate change, whether it has to do with loss of land, degradation of land, loss of biodiversity. A lot of challenges are coming online. But we still do see many opportunities, and I think you're going to be hearing about those from our discussants today. So our talk today is going to be really exploring a lot of the complexities of the very dynamic relationship which exists between pastoralists and wildlife on the land that they share. And this does touch a lot on examining the issues of mobility and connectivity. So these have been fundamental to the one could say the coevolution of pastoralists and wildlife, is that there's been tremendous connectivity in the landscape, and seasonal mobility has been a big part of the survivorship. But of course, this has led in more recent times to more issues around disease transmission, the loss of livestock to predators, and also the reverse, which has been impact on the wildlife from pastoralists and from the livestock. So today we're going to be hearing about ongoing strategies for fostering that coexistence. So we really want to be hearing stories about where things are working better, but very importantly, and why we have the speakers we do today, is because we really want to hear about how, while trying to manage this system of coexistence, we are intentionally helping to safeguard the cultural needs and practices of pastoral communities. So we hope this session is going to be offering you some valuable insights as we navigate through this intersection. And I think you're going to see from our participants that they're talking about some pretty different systems, even within pastoral systems. So at the moment, we can see that we're right up there. So I am impressed by 76% of people on here feeling very optimistic or mildly optimistic, and see that we still have 9% that we can move one way or another, and the pessimistic ones will be our target. Okay, so let's get going. On to the next slide, please, Sue. So some of you who follow the lecture series or the debate and discussion series that we have know that we've done this particular one in a two-part series. The first session that we did was one that we did, gosh, it's been months now, back in 2023, the middle part, I believe. And that was one in which we were discussing sort of to the left side of that mixed wildlife livestock continuum. We talked a lot about these intensive livestock and game farming operations, many of them privately owned, many of them running both cattle and wildlife on the same property, but trying to do different businesses out of the two. Sometimes tourism, sometimes a meat business of wild and domestic animals, sometimes just continue having mostly a wild livestock system. So today's we're going to be actually going on, Sue, you could go to the next one, to talk about the arid and semi-arid rangelands, primarily of northern Tanzania and southern Kenya. And these are really the open wildlife livestock systems, most of them on community-owned or managed lands. And so this is really talking about a different part completely. And I think last time we had some interesting questions that people were sort of trying to jump to this system already. I think we found that a lot with our questions last time. And so now what we want to try and do is to bring you fully into the right-hand side, where we really focus now on these pastoral areas and on what is happening in them, and how does it compare to the more traditional ways, and how are things moving forward in terms of challenges and opportunities. So I will come on now to introduce our wonderful three panelists today. And I've been fortunate in getting more and more opportunity as we prepare for this to get to know them a bit better. But you have their bios, their in-depth bios, because each of these people has quite some background on the web page. But just to give you a brief introduction. So Elias Ole Morindat is a Maasai elder. He's a trainer, a researcher, and a facilitator. For the last 35 years, he has had experience in rural development and climate change adaptation in Tanzania. He's an independent consultant, as well as being a director of the Tanzania People and Wildlife's Active Program, and that's capital A, capital C, capital T, capital I, capital V, capital E. So not only is he super active, as you're going to be hearing, but that's the program that he oversees. The next is Teriano Soit, who you see there in the middle. Teriano is incredible. She holds an undergraduate degree in law and is currently pursuing her master's in law. For the last 5 years, she's been working in the conservation field, and we welcome you to that, Teriano, because we often have a very hard time having people with legal minds involved in our conservation work. And it definitely helps us because of some of the challenges we more and more need to have that legal mind. So Teriano is currently working as an administrator in the Pardamat conservation area. This is an area that I also work in, which is this whole area of the conservancies that are to the north and east of the Masai Mara National Reserve. So Teriano, welcome. And lastly, but certainly not least, Dr. Isaac Lekolul. Isaac is a veterinarian, obviously. He graduated in veterinary medicine back in 1999, and he has been in many significant roles within the Kenya Wildlife Service. He's currently worked his way to become an assistant director, which is in the highest ranks of the Kenya Wildlife Service. And with over 2 decades of experience, he's now focusing on zoonotic bacterial tick-borne pathogens while contributing significantly to wildlife conservation. So Isaac has been through it all, and he continues to further his education because this man is following his heart from a very young age. So we're now going to be having the statements, the opening remarks from each of our 3 speakers, and I'm going to be taking them in the following order. So Elias will go first, and then Teriano, and then Isaac. So Elias, I'll turn over to you, please, sir.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you, everybody, for attending this session. I am going to talk about pastoralism myself. I'm a pastoralist elder. I live in a Boma. I happen to have an opportunity to get Western education, but I also practice my Maasai way of life every single day of my life. And today we want to talk about pastoralism and talk about coexistence issues, mobility issues, connectivity issues, as they relate to rangelands, pastoralism, livestock keeping, and definitely wildlife as well. Pastoralism is a system, a very, very old system that has existed in our world for many, many years. It is a system who is made out of 3 main pillars. And these pillars are very, very important to understand because they regulate dynamics of how these people live with their environment. And the first pillar is about natural resources of water, of highlands, of lowlands, of very, very dry lands. These are the key natural resources needed for them, their livestock, and wildlife as well. The second pillar is the livestock herd. When we talk about livestock, we're talking about cattle, goat, sheep, donkeys, camels. These are all the livestock of pastoralists, and they depend on natural resources for them to survive. And finally, the third pillar is the social institution, the institution of the Maasai people, which is hierarchical and flat in many ways, which regulates everything in terms of the usage of natural resources and also the livestock herd species and coexistence with wildlife regimes. This system used to work very, very well because within it, we then see and can interpret the other 3 pillars of our livelihoods and our philosophies, which is our philosophy of being, our philosophy of belonging, and our philosophy of becoming as a people. And bringing all this together in the context of rangeland livestock wildlife coexistence, you can immediately see that we then survived and lived together and thrived together all these years. Until only recently, things have changed to the pastoralist Maasai particularly, and to all those who live within this disequilibrium environment, and we see a lot of problems emerging now. Now, these places that we live are dry. These are dry lands ecosystems whose rains are inconsistent in time, in space, and in what it produces in terms of pasture and in terms of water for both livestock herd and wildlife. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elias. I think that's a very nice overview and context setter to the world of pastoralism. And I'm going to then next come on to Teriano to give you her reflections from her perspective and the place that she lives.
So, hi everyone. I am Teriano Soit, as was introduced by Holly a while ago. I was born and live in Masai Mara, Kenya. Masai Mara is in the southern part of Kenya. And as Elias has mentioned, because I'm also from the Masai community, and Masai Mara is inhabited by the Masai community, the Masai's way of life is pastoralism. So until around 2006, the occupants of Masai Mara only depended on livestock and tourism in the Masai Mara National Reserve. But around 2005, 2006, a new concept emerged, and luckily the community embraced it. Conservation set in, and Olaremotorogi Conservancy was first formed in the Masai Mara region. So the community that settled around that area were requested to move out of certain boundaries that were set for the conservancy. And of course, land had already been subdivided. That was the first portion that was already individually owned. So the community had to settle outside the conservancy boundaries, and the conservancy area was set apart for wildlife and tourism. And what happened was that tourism was very appealing in this particular area, because unlike in the game reserve, the camps inside are quite few. And so there's that high chance of having exclusive approach to animals or exclusive view of the game in the conservancy. And because the land was already individually owned, what the conservancy was giving in return is a monthly lease fee. So depending on the acreage of your land, at the end of the month, you get a fee, a lease fee from the land that you leased to the conservancy. So in 2009, another part of the Mara called Mara North followed suit, and they also set apart a certain area for conservation, and the families that lived in were requested to settle outside the conservancy boundaries. And in 2010, another one, Nabosho, followed suit, and it happened likewise. Besides the exclusive tourism in the conservancies that has been very attractive and are fetching very good returns, the conservancies have also acted as grass banks for livestock. Because everyone moved outside the conservancy boundaries, it meant that the conservancy now regulated how livestock would get into the conservancy, how it would graze, and how it would get out. And for sure, I can testify that the last time, like the Masai in the Masai Mara region, or in that particular area surrounding Nabosho or Laremotorogi, Mara North, last went to the other side of the river, which is the Mara Triangle, during dry spells or long droughts, was in 2009. Ever since the establishment of the conservancies, there has been enough grass for the livestock during the rainy season and the dry season. The conservancies have also impacted the lives of the people living around them in immense ways. That's because the beneficiaries not only get the lease fee, but there are other numerous benefits that accrue to them. And these benefits are, for example, every school term or at the beginning of every school term, there is a bursary given to high school children and college children of the landowners. So at the beginning of every term, you're given a check. It could be 5,000 Kenya shillings. It could be 8,000 Kenya shillings. And it depends on like the arrangement in a particular conservancy. Depending on the arrangement, you could get a bursary for 2 kids, or 3 kids. So that has also been quite helpful.
I think
Besides,
we're gonna move on. So if you want to just finish up there, and then we're going to be coming back to you with other questions that will give you opportunity to talk more about those benefits. Don't know if there's a last thing you want to see in your opening comments.
Okay, that's okay, Sue. Sorry, okay, Holly. So the conservancies, as I have said, the conservancies in the Mara have created a very good interaction platform for wildlife and livestock, because the Maasai community is benefiting both from the tourism activities in the conservancies, from which they're gaining some money, and from the livestock grazing in the conservancies. And it has led them to value livestock more, to embrace conservation, and it's also a good sign of probable sustainability of the conservancies because of the appreciation for wildlife and livestock as much. Thank you.
Okay, great. So that's a story of optimism and even looking further out towards sustainability. So Isaac, we're now going to come on to you to give your opening remarks, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, Sue. Good evening, participants, and thank you for taking time to join this conversation. Yes, I believe my background is already out there. You heard that I work for the Kenya Wildlife Service currently. I was born in the northern parts of Kenya, one of the nomadic or pastoralism kind of setups. That is the Samburu community. And it's one of the Ma communities that resides on the north of the railway. Samburu basically is one of these considered to be an asal area. Nomadism or pastoralism was like the key kind of lifestyle that people engage in that part of the world. And that is where I was brought up in the initial years before I went to school in other parts of the country, Kenya, and eventually graduating at the University of Nairobi, and finally making a decision to join the wildlife sector. Some of the things that made me join the wildlife sector or want to join the wildlife sector was partly from my upbringing, because of where we lived before. Our community lives in one of these areas that wildlife was found all over. My homestead, we lived with lions, we lived with buffaloes, all sorts of wildlife, and that's what we knew growing up. They were very friendly, and I thought at some point I needed to maybe give back to that sector. So I joined the Kenya Wildlife Service, whose mission currently is to conserve Kenya's wildlife and its habitats for posterity. And our mission is to sustainably manage Kenya's wildlife and its habitats for the benefit of nature and humanity. So being a veterinarian and being a person from that pastoralism kind of background, I am sort of like a child of both worlds. So I've seen the pastoralism world and also now engaged in the government side of wildlife conservation. So this has really, can you hear me, Holly? Holly?
We can hear you.
Can somebody
Isaac?
confirm whether...
Yes, definitely we can
Okay.
hear you, Isaac. Definitely. All good.
Sorry. Okay, on my end, it seems like it does hand. I can't can see the timer moving. Maybe there's something
You're
wrong
at
with my
2
network. But
2
yes,
minutes left, 2.5 minutes left.
Thank you, thank you. So as I was saying, I'm a child of both worlds. That is the pastoral kind of world, and also now from the government side on the wildlife conservation proper. So this gives me an advantage in what I do on a day-to-day basis, and it also makes my work much easier. From the background of veterinary, it gives me an opportunity now to really be able to engage the communities well. My line of duty. We do work very closely with the county governments who run or manage some of the national reserves. We do also work very closely with some of the conservancies that also host lots of wildlife. We work very closely with some of the communities. We have some wildlife, which in a way they are really at the heart of the livestock, human livestock wildlife interface, and any challenges facing livestock is a challenge facing the wildlife, and that's why we need to really work very closely. So in terms of disease surveillance or also management of diseases and in these areas, we work very closely with the Directorate of Veterinary Services, of which we as Kenya Wildlife Service Veterinary Department, we do serve that role of animal health on behalf of the Director of Veterinary Services. So I think I'll stop there for now, and we can continue with the program. Thank you.
Excellent. So as my speakers know, we're going to enter into a question and answer period between myself and the panelists. And each of these are going to be questions for them that they have a couple of minutes to answer. So I'm first going to go back to Terriano and ask Terriano, Terriano, this gives you a chance to kind of get even more specific. So given the role of women in pastoral communities, including caring for small stock, milking of cows, finding and securing firewood, what specific challenges would you say that there are for women in living with wildlife, for pastoral women? What would you say are their biggest challenges?
I would say the first big challenge is encountering dangerous game when they go out to fetch firewood or to fetch water, because you find that some people even walk a kilometer to fetch water and more than 3 kilometers to fetch firewood, and also to care for stock, because as it is now, people have sent their kids to school. So mostly it's the women who had stock, sheep and cows during the school period. So the biggest challenge is encountering dangerous animals. They would encounter elephants or buffaloes or lions, and they wouldn't know how to maybe escape them other than the traditional ways of, for example, elephants. You have to make sure that they don't get your scent. If it's a buffalo, just lie low, ensure it doesn't see you. So that's one of the biggest challenges that they encounter in carrying on those household chores.
Okay, great. And, you know, I just wanted to, Terriano, you might want to make an additional comment because I'm going to next move to Elias, but just a short in-between comment. And that is that, you know, for people who've just heard you explain that the privatization of land on the Kenya side, in other words, individual landowners holding title deeds, has required people to come back together with their title deeds to create these conservancies. And it's just a point to make because a lot of people don't really understand necessarily the background of the conservancies and what it means when you have title deeds and then you have to come back together as a pastoral people to manage the areas as open rangelands. So let me come to Elias because he's talking more in the context of these more traditional and still open rangelands completely. Elias, what things would you ended your talk saying, well, those were all the ways that we did have, and these were our 3 pillars, and this is how we socially managed the system and culturally. But what would you say? You ended by saying that things are changing. So what are some of the challenges that are occurring now? You're on mute.
There are many challenges. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So there are many, many challenges in our land today, one of which is our system here in Tanzania, and particularly northern Tanzania with all the pastoralist groupings, is to rely on land that is communally used. Contrary to what our friends in Kenya do, we live within rangelands, use rangelands together, we own rangelands together. And although we live in villages now, land belongs to everybody who is alive today and hopefully to the millions who are yet to come. But within that, we see interference and the use of land.
Sorry, you went on mute again. Elias?
I think he was having a power issue because he suddenly grabbed a cable.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll come back to that. I think that he's getting at something that that is an interesting difference between the places, but not to have people feel that they're not still living quite a traditional lifestyle in the Mara, even with these conservancies. Before Elias comes back, I'm going to just go on to Isaac for a quick question. Isaac, reflecting on your own personal journey, which has been a pretty considerable one, and I know you've had a lot of interface with both the wildlife and the livestock. How has your perception evolved from your upbringing of growing up in a Samburu community, very similar to the Maasai community, to becoming in this very senior position in the Kenya Wildlife Service, where you're looking over and helping to maintain safe situations for both wildlife and livestock? What are some of your observations on that?
Thank you, Holly, for that question. Yes, looking back, I know during our times when we were growing up, we were very few in terms of the human population, especially in that part of the world. So there was plenty of land, plenty of room for, especially for the wildlife to roam freely, and also for our livestock to be able to graze side by side with the wildlife without any cause of conflict. But over the years, we've seen a lot of change, especially changes in the land use. Many more people are converting their lands for other purposes. We're seeing fences coming up all over, especially in my community. Previously, what was happening is that we were living on land that was considered to be community or community-owned land. But as you've heard, there are many areas that people now are getting their own title deeds. Fortunately for Teriano, I think in the Masai Mara area, many people have come together to put up conservancies. But fortunately or unfortunately for some of us, there's still that feel of personal ownership. So there's been that challenge in terms of getting to set up conservancies up north. But the good thing is that the land is still available. The wildlife is still there, and from the two perspectives, the pastoralism that I grew up in, and the current need for securing more land for wildlife conservation, I think I'm convinced that we are heading in the right direction by getting the communities really engaged in what we do on a day-to-day basis. Thank you.
Okay, that gives me a good springboard to what I wanted to ask Teriano, because getting more and more people involved, what we see in these systems is that there's a very big need to build awareness and to build understanding. So Teriano, What role do you feel that education and awareness programs might be playing in sort of fostering community support for wildlife conservation among the communities that you're with? Is there a major role of education and awareness?
Yes, it plays a quite vital and critical role. So just from the primary education that one gets in school, you know, at least when you go to school and you're literate, you get to know or to learn about wildlife, and you get to learn about national reserves, game reserves, that there are places or areas that have been set aside or protected for wildlife. And at least you get to just that basic understanding of wildlife existing in places where that have been like secluded for wildlife. And then now in a landscape like the Mara landscape, where wildlife conservation is like an alternative means of living. It's another like a land use parallel to pastoralism here in the Mara. Then of course, it has to be made sure that the community really gets to understand and appreciate these and embrace these. So let me give an example of an organization like the Mara Trust, which you could be aware of in the Mara ecosystem. Like they have this slogan that they call it Tengara Kimwesi. Like everything they do is because of wildlife. So if it's education, like the scholarship program, we are giving you education because of wildlife. If it's beadwork for the women, we are doing this because of wildlife. If it's honey, if it's restoration, we are doing it because of wildlife. And I think because of that awareness and that education in the community gets to appreciate and value and embrace our wildlife conservation more. And of course, also the benefits. So it has played quite a critical role. Another organization that has done that vigilantly is the Kenya Wildlife Trust, the MPCP project, close to also the Mara Trust, because they also try to create awareness through films, through tours. So it's happening in the Mara. MMWCA is another organization that is also doing that, creating awareness and educating the community, and it's making a very big impact here in the landscape. The Conservancy is the same through rangers who are locals from the community and actually from the settlements bordering the conservancies. So through that awareness, the community is valuing wildlife more. Thank you.
Okay, Tariana, I'm going to actually just continue with you on that line, because I'd kind of like to know, I mean, you're painting everything. It's very positive. There's a lot of benefits coming out. People are getting educated. They're beginning to understand the link between the positive aspects of their livelihoods and the wildlife. But now that you've had this sort of decade worth of experience of the conservancies in the Mara, what's been your experience like of everything that you're seeing in general? Like what challenges still exist and what things are we really making headway through? So maybe touch a bit on the challenges as well.
There are numerous challenges. Human wildlife conflict is an obvious one, but because we've previously talked about the challenges that women encounter when they're going about their daily chores, and human wildlife conflict is one. And then in the conservancies, there are a lot of threats to their existence. And one of them is fencing. There's a lot of fencing in the Mara region. Conservancies that are exclusive or that do not have settlements inside of them do not experience such a challenge, but a conservancy like ours, which is a conservation area, a different model where people live inside the conservancy with their livestock, and we still we still endeavor to protect and preserve wildlife. Fencing is such a challenge. It has blocked migratory corridors. It has interfered with dispersal areas. And it's a big challenge because of the pastoralism lifestyle of the Maasai. They want the fences for grass banks for their animals during the wet and the dry season. So fencing is one quite big challenge. Another challenge is population growth. Population is growing rapidly, and as population grows, so do settlements. Everyone wants to have their settlement. Maybe in the past, and he lived with maybe 4 wives and 20 sons, and now each of those sons wants a settlement of their own. What does that mean? Encroachment into the conservancies. People want to settle on their parcels inside the conservancies. So population growth is another quite big challenge here in the Mara, and a threat to sustainability of our conservancies.
Okay, great. I'm going to go back to Isaac, actually, which is a follow-on.
And then also mushrooming challenge, because with urban centers. Sorry, Holly?
Yeah, no, I was just
Holly, are you speaking?
Yeah, I was just going to go back to Isaac because I wanted him to respond on one of those questions while we still have time. Is that okay?
I am.
We have a delay.
Not getting you well.
I'm just going to switch to a question to Isaac, which follows on from the comments that you're making.
That's okay. I have heard you. That's okay.
Okay. Isaac, over to you. So Teriano has commented on a lot of the challenges and threats, but I'm wondering from your side, you know, we often speak of costs to pastoralists and to wildlife in these sort of settings where land is being shared on a day-to-day basis. So what do you think these costs are for the pastoralists of living with the wildlife? You know, is it about disease transmission? Is it about predation by wild predators on their livestock? And vice versa, what's the situation for the wildlife and what are the costs for wildlife? So let's hear a little bit about the trade-offs for wildlife and for pastoralists.
Yes, thank you, Holly. Yes, when you find these two maybe areas coming to merge, that is the wildlife and the livestock, at the interface, there's definitely the risk of disease transmission, this potential disease transmission, and also in terms of predation, as I said, with the increase in human population, there's that interface has really shrunk, and we find there's more close relation between the predators and now the livestock. Sometimes we think the wildlife are getting more bright, they know where to escape, and unfortunately, the easy prey becomes our livestock. So there's definitely a cost on both the livestock and also the wildlife. In terms of disease transmission, yes, there could be various kinds of diseases. It could be either zoonotic diseases or just the normal diseases that can affect wildlife and also can affect livestock. And in terms of the cost for wildlife, unfortunately, they sometimes suffer persecution because of the thoughts that they are the problem reservoirs. They keep the problems within the ecosystems, and we've seen in some areas animals like the wild dogs are being persecuted. They're being killed because they are thought to be the carriers of rabies. In some areas, I think in the parts of the Masai Mara ecosystem, we've had people complaining about the wildebeest because of the malignant catarrh fever transmission. And in some areas, we have also been told that the buffaloes are sometimes thought to be the harbors for a disease like foot and mouth disease, which is a trade kind of sensitive disease. For countries that are known to have this disease, sometimes they're cut off from the international trade in livestock and livestock products. And sometimes wildlife becomes thought to be the culprit, and that's why we need to address some of these issues holistically. Some of these cases, or most of these cases, are usually not substantiated, but we've seen from past research that some diseases have been confirmed or are thought to be, some of the zoonotic diseases are thought to be of wildlife origin. In the recent past, we've seen the diseases like COVID. Before that, we saw Ebola. Lucky enough for us as a country, as Kenya, we've not experienced Ebola as a country, but yes, in the regions like the DRC and parts of Uganda, they've been able to get affected by a disease like Ebola. Diseases like anthrax in people or human beings who have consumed carcasses from dead livestock, some of them have been affected and they have contracted anthrax. But so far, we've not been able to get any confirmed case of anthrax in human beings that is thought to be from a wildlife source. We have other diseases like rabies, where we have people persecuting hyenas in think that the hyenas might be the cause of the rabies in those areas. Yet, from our studies, we've seen that the rabies that is in circulation in most parts of our country are the dog rabies. So what we've done is, since we know now it's the dogs, and then we know how to approach in terms of the control. Stock losses to predators. I think
Yeah,
I'm
gonna ask you to end there because you're a couple minutes over on that. But I think that we can see that when you start getting into the challenges, they start getting to be many. And I'm just going to ask the indulgence of our audience. I know everyone's been asking some great questions. I'm trying to capture those so that we can ask our speakers that. But I just wanted to give Elias, sorry that we lost you. This is a common problem for us in Africa. But just to give you just a couple of minutes, maybe to, share with us just a few thoughts on how you feel that policy and legislation in these countries, maybe particularly for Tanzania, could be improved to address these challenges and to take greater advantage of the opportunities that are there. Maybe just a couple of minutes, and that's sort of starting now, and then I'm going to turn to the questions from the audience. Thank you, Elias. I hope it stays stable for you. You're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so thank you very much, and sorry for what has happened. There are many, many problems now, today, a lot of which is caused by conservationists themselves, keeping a blind eye to things that are real and to helping conservation to become and to help everybody to thrive in it. Policy, particularly, is an area that needs to be interrogated. We think that it's a missed opportunity when policies that are made are based on Western and colonial ways of thinking, not allowing or incorporating the human beings who are the custodians of these lands, in this case, the Maasai, to influence how life should be managed in these drylands ecosystems and coordinated in a way that everybody thrives. Number two, policies tend to favor money and pleasure and happiness of a few only, and forgetting that tourists need to be happy, but the Maasai who live in these areas need to be happy too. Tourists need to benefit from the money they pay, but the Maasai too need to benefit. Also, that putting conservation in a language that people understand, contribute to making them better conservationists. Alienating them and bringing top-down conventional approaches to conservation is a problem. I think I'll stop by saying that pastoralist Maasai in my nation state not only have been the custodians of land and have looked after wildlife in these pristine, I don't like that term, these areas, they have been punished for looking after these wildlife and spaces for many years without any reward. It is a function of bad policies, a lot of which have colonial roots and top-down, and close an eye on realities that are seen. And those who are studying, looking after these things, they have compromised and contributed to not enhancing good conservation, but conservation without a human face. I leave it at that.
Thank you, Elias. I know I for sure would want to stay on for another couple hours to discuss what you've just raised there. I'm pretty sure some of our audience would as well. And I just ask our audience to keep in mind, I've gathered a number of questions here, but you know, the issues of policy are stark, and there are big differences between the countries on the issues of policy, which is one of the reasons why I asked Elias to comment on that, because you know, communities and their land tenure and their rights are not handled the same way by all countries in Africa that have pastoral communities. So I now want to come on to give a chance for people from the audience who have asked a lot of questions. And I want to just come back on some of those. We're getting some good commentary in the chat if the speakers want to take a look at that. I think that coming into the policy discussion, which was what I was going to be asking Elias had he not left us for a few minutes, but he got in there and gave us those comments very, very quickly. So I'm just going to pick a couple out of these. And I see that people are answering one another in the chat as we go, but I want our speakers to get a chance at some of this. Just to go over a couple of them, Kirsten Johnson, you asked the question of, you thanked Teriano for her positive messages on the benefits, and you asked about the fencing. And I think she unwittingly came back on that. So you do understand that this is particularly on the Kenyan side in the Mara area. We have an increasing issue with the fencing because of the privatization of land and the ability to do that for excluding. And answer to William, are you allowed to respond to the questions? Please just keep responding in the chat so that I can try and pick up the questions from people who have been putting comments in all along. So one of the questions that was asked by Philip Anderson Samura was for Teriano. Does it mean that they can't own land by purchasing? Oh, sorry, that was not specifically for Teriano, but I'll just put it out there. Any of you can answer. Does it mean that they can't own land by purchasing, or land is not purchasable generally? So I think the short answer on that, and I'm going to turn back on some of these other ones. In Kenya, it is privatized. So there is ownership and there is every ability to sell and buy. Teriano might want to make a comment about women and ownership. But in Tanzania, these are not individually owned lands. The land is owned by the government. And that is a stark difference, because when the government owns the land, you're held to the government policies. But Teriano, would you like to comment on women and land ownership in the Mara?
In the Maasai community, which is like almost 100% patriarchal, women do not own land unless you buy it. If you buy a piece of land, then you can own it, but you cannot inherit it from your parents. And that's very unfortunate, because according to our succession laws, the Kenyan succession laws, everyone is entitled to inherit land from their parents, be it girls or boys, but down here in the community, it's otherwise. Few women have land, but those are widows, and you do not own land until your husband passes on. So yeah, that's the situation.
Right. So that causes a limitation, and it's under discussion quite a bit about women and land ownership. So another question that's just come in from Sixbert: what do you think is going to resolve some challenges to those wildlife ecosystems as the population is increasing exponentially while soil is not created, but somehow destroyed by these anthropogenic activities in relation to nutrient recycling done by small wild organisms? I don't know, Isaac, do you feel you can take that on at all? Or anyone else?
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe I can answer partially, and maybe my colleagues can also give a hand. Yes, I know with this subdivision of land, and as we said, some of the community or the group ranches are currently getting their own titles. Most of them are now able, and they can say to sell maybe to the highest bidders. So what we are seeing is also other conservancies coming up with big or large tracts of land. And we as Kenya Wildlife Service have a team that is within the veterinary department, the capture and construction team, that can come in handy to move some of these wildlife that are at threat of either starvation, because the land has been completely changed, or they could be easily killed because of destroying the crops that are now currently being grown on these pieces of land. So we are trying to see where and how we can move these animals to a safer ground. So yes, there is possibility in getting these animals saved and also put in the right areas where they can thrive. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Isaac. So this happens on every one of our sessions, that we see that it's now 26 minutes past the hour. And that means that we really kind of have to move on to start closing. But I do just want to point out, you'll see a number of comments that have come out in the chat, which drive straight back, Elias, to your point about conservation becoming more important than the pastoral way of life, and where this is influenced from. And there's some comments about how conservation is paying off and supporting livelihoods. I think Tariano touched on a number of those. There are also some very controversial areas, such as Basel Stephen mentioned about carbon trading, which even in Kenya and Tanzania, we have very positive examples and we have some very negative examples. So I hope that people will continue their dialogue. It's complex, and we wanted to expose you to some of the complexities. But I think we also were able to show you that there's still a very great hope that comes both from pastoral people and from those who work with them. So I'm going to have Leanne put the next poll up as we're getting right to the very end, and then I'll just sum up. So if people could participate in the poll, that would be really helpful. Okay, we've got about 50% of you have participated. Let's get as many people in there as we can in the next 30 seconds or so. It helps us tremendously to see what people are feeling about these things, and helps us also to look at what the real problems are and where they really have to be tended to. So we have now about 67% of you. I'm going to let it get up to 70, and then we're going to end the poll. A few more people want to vote. I think it's been very impressive. We started the meeting today with 81 of you online, and we still had 80 as of just a moment ago. So that's really pretty good. People staying with us, we much appreciate. So we're going to end the poll there. Basically, we have had an increase into the very optimistic and mildly optimistic. It's now at 91%. So obviously a number of don't knows, they all vacated not knowing, and they've all joined into either very optimistic, which is at 41%, mildly optimistic at 50%, and we still have 5% feeling pessimistic and another 4% very pessimistic. So this is what we like to enjoy in this session, which is getting people who are really there, really living these lives. And I think from the chat we saw that there are other people. I know William was very engaged in giving a lot of answers to his colleagues. I think I'm going to look you up, William, to get you on one of our additional sessions. And I just want to very, very quickly just say that it is the situation that things are changing rapidly for pastoral communities in Eastern Africa. I don't think our panelists had a chance to even talk with you about the effects of climate change and how this is just adding another pressure onto systems that are already under the various threats of climate, human-wildlife conflict, biodiversity loss, fencing, human population growth, more settlements. So we see these incredibly important systems. In the Kenyan situation, we know that over 70% of the wildlife is living outside of protected areas with these communities. They are fundamental to the future of wildlife. As such, those communities are fundamental to everything we all believe in. So I think Tanzania has an even more amazing situation. And I'm sure a lot of you read the news. You're very well aware of a lot of the discussions going on in Tanzania right now about the settlement of the Maasai and resettlement to other areas. And so these are the people here that we're talking with today who are living these lives. So I want to end there by thanking everyone so much for giving me just a minute or two of breathing space. Elias, pole sana mzee. We will tutaongea nawe baadaye. And we'll come back to this gentleman and to all of our panelists. Thank them so much. They really put a lot of time and thought into this session. We spoke on many occasions, and I want to thank them for their time and end by thanking all of you, all 80 minus who have been with us throughout this entire session. And we look forward to hosting you at the next one in our series, which the African Leadership University School of Wildlife Conservation will keep you all informed about. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.